look, we say we're probably not ever going to fund the cure for cancer. Realistically, we're probably not raising that much money. But if we can make an individual impact on all these families that we have, then mission accomplished. And one of the coolest things, and we have a suite that we have for the Bills games that these families can go to. The waitress in there is fully checked out. She's got to be very, very healthy, no illness anytime recently, completely disinfected suite, to where a lot of these families, this is the only time they get to leave the hospital the entire week. And so for them to be able to go to a Bills game and take, everyone in Buffalo loves the Bills.
Yeah.
It's a special thing. And so for them to be able to get out and go to a game is really special.
Good morning, and thank you all so much for joining us on another episode of the Game on Glio podcast, our last episode for season 3. But I want to talk to you a little bit right now, before we bring on our special guest today, about the journey through the holidays. And I want to be real with all of you for a minute. I try very hard to instill hope and inspiration and strength, but I have noticed challenges and some uphill battles over the last 3 years that I wasn't expecting. But as much as I've been trying to take care of my emotional well-being, counseling and working out and meditating, my physical health, even though I've been trying to stay active, I have not been the greatest at feeding my immune system. Why am I talking about this? Why am I bringing this up? I was very passionate about food. I cooked 4 to 5 days a week. I made balanced, nutritious meals all the time. And I was always researching creative and new meals to make and thinking outside the box and healthy ways to eat and healthy ingredients. And since Mike died, I haven't been doing a great job of that. And my immune system has taken a hit. I've just gotten sick a lot more frequently than I used to. It's been hard to motivate myself to cook for myself, to take care of myself in the same way that I used to when I had somebody else to cook for. And that was something I enjoyed. And it's a lot of those things that I'm missing right now. And every time you get sick, every time something happens, it knocks you down again and again and again. So the last 3 years have been an uphill battle. And I will say that I am doing okay and I am doing good. But I want all of you to know that if you're still experiencing bumps in the road, you're not alone. If you feel like you're missing parts of yourself, if you feel like parts of you are lost or hidden, that's normal when you go through significant loss. It's okay to be on the journey that you're on. The goal is to never give up. And that's the secret to all of this. No matter how hard things get, even after the loss, never give up. Never walk away. And always try to find gratitude in the things that are going right or going well. Try to be thankful and find even the smallest of blessings or light. And at times lately, that has not been easy for me, but I still do it. I will say that walking through the holidays is not easy for me right now. Being a dreamer, having dreams, seeing the magic in the season, those are all very difficult for me right now, and they're a bit hidden. But I am trying. And for all of you that are walking through your own journey, you will find the magic again. Things will become unhidden. And we actually talk about that. Gratitude lists, doing a gratitude practice every single day. We talk about that with our guest, Eric Wood, a public speaker, an author, and previously the center for the Buffalo Bills football team. He sits down with us and he talks about tackling what's next. And we'll hear from him after a brief word from our sponsor. To hear an extended version of this, head to our audio version on Podbean, GameOnGlioPodcast.com, or anywhere podcasts are played. Season 3 of the Game on Glio podcast is sponsored by GT MedTech and Gamma Tile Therapy. Learn more at gtmedtech.com. And by IMVAX, personalized whole tumor-derived immunotherapies. Learn more at imvax.com. So with us today is Eric Wood, a former NFL player, having played his entire career at the center for the Buffalo Bills, where he was the first-round draft pick, a two-time Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee, and a Pro Bowler. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us today on the Game on Glio podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure. Honored to be on it.
So we have a lot to dive into today. You have quite an amazing life, and you've actually been through quite a bit in your lifetime. And you're younger than me, so that says quite a lot. While you're a celebrated pro athlete, it's also safe to assume that your upbringing played a huge role in your football career on and off the field. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Grew up on the west side of Cincinnati, which is more of the blue-collar side of town, and I credit the west side of Cincinnati for a lot of my work ethic, and a lot of that was modeled to me as a kid by whether it be my parents or coaches or people within the community. So a strong work ethic is something that I value, and part of that is from my upbringing. And, just so many people along the way that have impacted my journey. And a lot of that comes from that west side of Cincinnati.
That's amazing. So you had a tight community that really uplifted you while you were growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we joke that it's just fast food restaurants and Catholic churches on the west side. So not a ton.
Nothing wrong with Catholic churches.
No, not at all. But it's celebrated high school sports in a strong sense of community, which was really cool to be a part of.
Do you find that having that, like when you came here to Buffalo, when you were drafted with the Buffalo Bills, do you find that the community here is similar to what you grew up with?
Absolutely. And I said that very shortly after I got here, that this reminded me of where I grew up. Now I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I played my college ball there. My wife's from there, which is not far from Cincinnati. So it makes it an easy spot for us to live, close to both of our families. But when I got up here, it reminded me of that. And a lot of it was the people.
Yeah.
And one of the things I do miss the most about my playing days in Buffalo are our neighbors, the relationships that we had up here. And now that I call the games, I get to see them, but it's not on an everyday basis like it used to be.
It's not the same. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your brother Evan, because growing up, part of your upbringing also includes your brother Evan, who was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. He was born with cerebral palsy. He died at the age of 11 years old. What lessons from that did you carry with you into adulthood?
Yeah, so we had a live-in nurse at our house until he was 7 years old, and he moved into a home because he was getting too big to carry around and all of that. So he had to move into a home. But prior to that, we had a nurse at our house 24/7. And so I got to see the strain that a sick child has on a family, financially, emotionally, physically at times, that in any child is a blessing. And Evan taught us so much. But I got to see a lot of that strain, and it impacted my journey a lot. And it impacted my parents' life and everything else. But because of that, I believe at times I have a different sense of perspective and a sense of gratitude of having two healthy children now, because I got to see what it's like when you don't have a healthy child. And but I say all that, now we've created the Evan Wood Fund. It used to be the Eric Wood Foundation up here in West New York.
Yep.
And so it's now the Evan Wood Fund under Oshad Children's Hospital, where I'm heading from here. So
Okay.
I do a hospital visit after this. But to be able to have my brother's legacy, he never walked, talked, or breathed on his own, but he'll have an impact here in Western New York with all the money that's raised for these families with sick children because of the impact that he had on me.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think that growing up, having seen what caregiving and caretaking looks like 24 hours a day, and the responsibility that a parent that has to bear that responsibility, did that sit with you as you got older? Did it change the way that you developed yourself, like emotionally, as you became an adult and then got drafted? I mean, given the global scale that you're on and the amount of media that you do, did it change the way you viewed things as you grew up?
Well, just to backtrack, that was normal to me. I was 3 years old when my brother Evan was born. So as far as I can remember, that was just normal to us. And my parents did such a great job of me and my other brother Tyler giving us attention and, not making us feel like all of their attention had to go to Evan. They did a great job of, I don't want to say compartmentalizing it, but balancing it. That's a great way of saying it, of balancing that to where, there wasn't ever a time where I couldn't get picked up from a sports practice or dropped off and all of that. So they did a great job of balancing all of that, which I truly appreciate now more than I did at the time because, like I said, that's all I knew at the time. And so, I think emotionally, having seen all that and I don't want to say being calloused, but you're just used to seeing it, that you might not be as affected with hearing maybe a diagnosis of an illness or times that I got injured in my career. I remember driving to work one time with a boot on my right leg. This is probably not legal, but I only lived about a mile from the stadium, and I was driving into rehab. I was already out for the season with a broken leg, and I'm driving in with my left foot, and I had a moment of gratitude there to think, man, I can still walk and I'm going to be okay. And there's so many that can't or that have gotten more severely injured. So I think it gives you a perspective in those moments as well.
That's an interesting take on it. And I tip my hat to your parents because that takes a lot of skill and a lot of strength to be able to still divest that much energy and time into the other kids and make sure that nobody's feeling neglected when there's that much that has to be done.
Right. And I say all that, my parents still got divorced, and the divorce rate for couples that have a sick child is over 90%. The national divorce rate is close to 50% now, over 90% when you have a sick child in the home. Yeah. And a lot of that's a strain. And, and I have no judgment on that because I understand all of the stress that it can cause on a relationship.
Now, you talked about how it's now the Evan Wood Fund, and it's now housed under the Oshai Foundation. So tell us a little bit about the mission of the fund, what the goals are for it, and why partner with Oshai? What was the purpose of that?
Yeah, I'll start with that, and then we'll get to the mission and what our goals are. So I switched it to a fund because when there's a foundation, there's a board, there's directors, there's a lot of people that need to be compensated for their time. Yeah. Well, when Oshai was being built and most of the children with severe illness, disability, they were all going to be housed under the same roof. We talked about how I can streamline it to where I'm not paying a bunch of people along the way of getting this money to the families. An acceptable rate of distribution of giving out of funds for a foundation would be between 60 and 70%. I believe last year we were at 97%. And my question was, where did the 3% go? And it was, apparel and different stuff that you're going to have costs within a foundation. But I love standing in front of a mic at an event and saying every dollar tonight that's raised is going to these families that have sick children. So our goal is to support as many families with sick children that we can. Each year, any family that needs financial assistance for the holidays, we will provide Christmas for them and their family. And we raise all of that at one event a year. And then there's so many others, whether it's golf tournaments in town or individuals that just want to be generous. And so that happens as well. But really, we do one fundraising event a year. And we'll send families out on date nights. And look, we say we're probably not ever going to fund the cure for cancer. Realistically, we're probably not raising that much money. But if we can make an individual impact on all these families that we have, then the mission accomplished. And one of the coolest things on the day of a Bills game, this is appropriate, we have a suite that we have for the Bills games that these families can go to. The waitress in there is fully checked out. She's got to be very, very healthy, no illness, anytime recently, completely disinfected suite to where a lot of these families, this is the only time they get to leave the hospital the entire week. And so for them to be able to go to a Bills game and take, everyone in Buffalo loves the Bills. Yeah. It's a special thing. And so for them to be able to get out and go to a game is really special.
That's an amazing feat to accomplish. I mean, that's such an amazing gift to give so many families. And speaking as somebody who didn't have a sick child, but had a very sick husband to cancer and lost him, the enormity, the weight of being a caregiver for somebody in your immediate orbit like that is, there's really no words that you can put to it. I mean, it is a lot.
Right.
It's a lot. Financially, emotionally, psychologically, the weight is just, and when you're just living in the hospital all the time, it does start to feel like you don't even know what normal feels like anymore.
Yeah.
So to have that kind of experience where you can give them something like that, I mean, that's got to make you feel just grounded in just the purpose.
It
of what
does.
is.
Yeah, it definitely does. And, my experience as a child in having a sick brother, and I said my parents did an incredible job with balancing attention and all of that. Well, that's not the case in every situation. So we pour into the siblings as well, and they'll have a special day at Darien Lake. And so we're really big on providing experiences to where maybe we save a marriage, maybe we reduce the financial strain enough to where they don't have that added onto their plate,
They can
and
feel
and
connected.
and maybe that's one less argument. Maybe that's and whatever impact we can have on these families, we're going to try and make it.
That's amazing. Now, you said that you have, you do one event a year. Is it a holiday event?
No, so
Okay.
it's in the fall. So
Okay.
we arrange it around a Bills home game, and it's called Flights and Bites. We do it at
Oh,
Resurgence Brewery
yep.
here in town now, and it's no pictures, no autographs. Some of the Bills guys will come out, and I want them to be able to have fun.
Yep.
And it's amazing when you kind of turn back the clock where not everyone's looking for that selfie moment,
Yeah.
how you have incredible conversations and
Meaningful.
exactly.
Yeah.
But it's truly a special night, and this is my 6th season out of the NFL, and I'm getting further and further removed from Buffalo Bills center Eric Wood. But it's amazing. Year after year, we raise more money at this event, and the community support gets greater and greater.
I can tell you right now, you'll never be too far removed from the Buffalo community. Once you're a Buffalonian, you're always.
Yeah, and calling the games on the radio now keeps me relevant in this space, and do enough kind of marketing deals around town that it has kept me relevant. And if family and friends were up here that are closest to us, this probably would be home. But I always say home is where family and friends are, and it'd be really tough to live up here and be away from them. And we did that for a while, when I was playing. But Western New York gave me so much that to be able to pour back into the community means a lot.
That's amazing. So there's a trend you've had most of your life where you've turned tragedy into triumph. You've gone through quite a few experiences over your lifetime. You faced another challenge in your life when you had a severe neck injury, which is what really ended your NFL career. Yet you went on to produce your own podcast, do public speaking, start your own business. You've authored a book, which is called Tackle What's Next, which I find very fascinating, and it's really piqued my interest. How did you learn to own your own story? Because a lot of what you put in the book talks about that and certain fundamentals to kind of help you navigate when the goalposts change. So how did you learn to own your own story? What does that even mean?
So I'll say this. As a Christian, I have a foundation of faith that I believe that God has a plan for me. And yes, I need to put the action into work, but that there is a plan for my life, a greater purpose. And God's put me on incredible platforms that I don't even understand at time, how a guy that got one scholarship offer to go to college at the very last minute ends up being a first-round draft pick and be able to do the types of things I've done media-wise. It blows my mind, but I believe I've been given this platform for a purpose. And in bouncing back from setbacks in my life, whether it was injuries or being overlooked at times in the sports world, whatever it's been, it's been trusting in that faith and that foundation. And then there's just been so many impactful people that have come in my life and help you through those times as well. And so, going into my final year in the NFL, I signed a contract extension before the season. I'm the only player on the team to play 100% of the snaps. And then I find out my career's over. And I actually find out in the waiting room or in the delivery room, and my son's going to be born 50 minutes later. And so I know. Yeah, no doubt. And I detail that story a lot more in the book. And there's laughs and tears that come from that story when, my wife is crying and the nurse comes in and says, "Baby, it's not going to hurt that bad." And she said, "It's not about the baby right now." And so Exactly. And so I find out my career's over and you feel cheated at the moment and you're down, but ultimately when you understand that okay, and you can look internally and find those moments of gratitude still and say, look at all I've been blessed with. Look at a healthy family and financial success at this point and whatever it may be. You find the things you're grateful for and then you move on and then you truly tackle what's coming next in your life. And look, I've heard it said before, you're either going through a storm in life, you're coming out of one, or heading into one. So don't be surprised when these storms in life come because they are coming. If you're in a moment without a storm in life, be grateful that you're not in one at the time, but lay the foundation so that when you are going to hit this storm, that you can withstand it.
So how would you tell somebody to lay that foundation? What does that actually look like? What tool or mechanism would you give somebody or tell somebody to lay the foundation to get them through when the storm is coming?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as well-rounded as you can be, the better. And so I mentioned faith or a spiritual practice. That's something throughout history, whether you're abiding by a religion or not, having a spiritual practice is healthy. Surrounding yourself with people that are calling you up in life, that make you better by their presence, whether that's friends, whether that's family, or a group that you put yourself in, a room that you put yourself in to make sure that you have a community around you that can support you during those times. Having, a financial egg there that you can rely on during hard times is going to be valuable. I understand that not everyone is going to play pro sports, but saving along the way and understanding that car trouble is going to happen. There's going to be things that pop up that are going to financially strain you, and saving along the way can help. Having a health and fitness routine to where you don't wait till you get injured and then you're already overweight and you can't work out to get back in shape, and it's this never-ending cycle. And so I think as being as well-rounded as you possibly can and kind of filling all of those buckets of life, whether it's relationally, spiritually, mentally, physically, financially, filling all those buckets is going to allow you to withstand those storms.
So you're touching on something that I've done a lot of public speaking on, which are pillars.
Yes.
Having 3 or 4 pillars, having your legs established so that when the foundation is rocked and things happen, you have things to lean on, you have your pillars. And even if one of your pillars is knocked out, for example, going through grief and loss of a spouse, technically that's usually a pillar.
Mm-hmm.
So usually when you have a partner in life, that becomes a pillar for you and a leg to stand on. So having other pillars and other pieces of your foundation established so that you have other things to lean on as you're moving through navigating the storm. And I think it's interesting that you really pull into perspective that either you've gone through a storm, you're in the middle of a storm, or there's a storm coming on the horizon. And as somebody of a very strong faithful background as well, I can tell you that is probably the only thing that I have right now that I have been leaning on immensely, is my faith, because I have absolutely no clue when I'm going to be out of the storm that I'm currently in, and I can't see the road ahead.
Yeah.
And I read something this morning. I tend to read little devotionals every morning to kind of get ready for the day, and there was something in there about be content with the gift I gave you today and let me worry about the road ahead. And it was kind of a reminder to myself that I can't think too far into the future. I just have to focus on what I can give to others today and the difference I can make and the seeds that I can plant that may help others, and leave everything else to, the universe or to God. And so I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because I do think that is fundamental.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, whether you believe in God or whatever it is, a spiritual practice, a spiritual practice has been shown throughout time to make a positive impact on your journey in life.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways to do that. There's so many different forms of spirituality and what that looks like for each individual. And we've talked about that many times, that it doesn't matter what exactly it is you believe in or what you call it, but having something like that to lean on. I do think that there are other forces at work here in this universe and, here on our planet. And I've had things happen where I'm like, I can't even explain. like how that just came to be. So I do, it's interesting to see how that moves, that presence and that energy moves through each of us and connects us,
Right.
connects all of us.
Absolutely.
You were also quoted a few years ago, and this is kind of all part of this journey that you've been on and the work that you do now. You were quoted a few years ago in an article saying that it's not the relationship that you had with Evan, but it's the relationship that you never got to have that you miss. For so many, they're walking through a storm or are still in the midst of a storm and haven't quite gotten through it yet, that understands exactly what that means. How do you hold space for that feeling and also find a way to honor him and move forward in life?
Yeah. And so, kind of the history behind that is, my little brother Tyler is 6 years younger and Evan was 3 years younger. So, right in the middle. And I think, you can think about and wish that you had that brother closer to your age that you could grow up with and play sports with and all that.
Yeah.
And so, you miss that.
Yeah.
But you never had it in
Right.
the first place. And so to me, even though Evan never walked or talked or breathed on his own, he was a part of our family. And when we loved him, he could light up any room with his smile. And so how do we make an impact for Evan? And a lot of that's through the Evan Wood Fund.
Mhm.
And then, just living how he's impacted each of us on a daily basis in our family and those that got to spend time with him. Well, that perspective that you carry each and every day is a way of honoring him as well.
I mean, if you think about it, and I've said this often, you don't have to speak to create a bond and an energy with somebody. And there are so many different levels of emotional connectedness. And sometimes it's through really intimate eye contact. Sometimes it's through just like this really spiritual connection without words. I mean, you don't have to have verbal dialogue with somebody to have a really deep-seated connection with them and have them have an impact on your life.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I've had this revelation recently. I ran into a fellow broadcaster that was also coming from a broadcast he had done an NFL game, ran into him at Atlanta airport, and we were talking for a few moments, and I had told him about the charity event that we had just done for my brother Evan, and he said to me, I always knew we had some type of connection that went further than we both played football and are in broadcasting and both love golf and married with kids and Christians. Like I always knew there was something more there. And he had lost a brother as well. He had lost his younger brother earlier in life as well. And so like energy wise, we connected on a deeper level without that was I've been friends with him for years and years and never knew that about him. I was on a podcast at one point, and we were a virtual podcast on video, and a guy who I look up to tremendously in this world, Ed Milet, and follow his podcast and think he's great.
Yeah.
And we were having a conversation prior to it, and he's like, "There's some type of connection here," and we started digging in on each other's stories, and we both came from a family with an alcoholic father. Now his father conquered it, and so did my dad.
Yeah.
And my dad hasn't drank in years, and we've rekindled a relationship, and now he's one of my great friends. And so it's amazing, like me and Ed had this connection prior to us either knowing that some of that trauma had affected us both, but just in the way we act and live, energy-wise, we could feel that from each other.
There was more of a soulful gut connection.
Yes.
And that's the only way I can describe it, is that there's this weird, it comes from the gut. Like it comes from this other deep place. And you meet these people in life that you just don't even realize. I have this one friend, she lost her husband to the same cancer that I lost my husband to. She lives out on the West Coast. We never even had met each other. And then all of a sudden one day we had this conversation, and not only did we connect because of our faith, but there was just this really deep, soulful connection. And we became fast friends. And she's like, I don't know what it is, but every time I talk to you, she's like, I feel like I've known you my entire life. And you come across those people, and sometimes you don't have to say a word. You already know what they're thinking or what the reaction is. Or, like with my best friend, sometimes, I'll have a dream about something, or I'll just get this feeling, and then I'll call to check on them, and they're like, how? And I'm like, I have no idea.
Right.
I have no idea. I can just tell you that I just had a feeling.
I was having a conversation with a friend last night that's in town for the game, and he is not a Christian or a man of faith. And twice he used the word serendipitous for something I would say would be a God wink.
Yes, I love that word.
And it's a great book.
Yeah.
God Winks, a very short read, awesome read for those out there. And it'd be a really quick audible listen or audiobook listen as well. Yeah, it's just funny because we were talking and I was like, I don't know that serendipitous. Like, I think that was meant to be in that situation.
Yeah.
And not just.
He was trying to skirt around using another word.
Yeah, exactly. But he said it twice and I was like,
Okay, sure, we'll go with that. So you talk in the book too, as we go on this journey with you and, you really create foundations for people to move through whatever it is their story is. I mean, that's what this book that you put together, that you wrote, that's what this is all about. But you talk about winning a lot in the book, and maybe not in the sense that most people would understand it. A lot of people, when they say winning, they're thinking, oh, I won something of value. I won something, where, I got all this money, or I became super famous, or I got exactly what I wanted. That's winning. Like I superseded this person, or, I hit this number on social media. That's winning. I won. And while winning can help us feel successful in that way, it's not the meaning of life. So what does winning mean to you? How do you define a win?
Yeah, so a win would be daily actions that are going towards a vision or goal that you've predetermined, because you can stack wins in your life. You can stack these small daily habits, but if they're not the habits that are getting you towards where you want to go, then they're not wins in that moment. Yeah. These wins that you stack in life can often lead you to financial success, a celebrity status, whatever you're looking for. Yeah. But it's those daily wins that give you the self-confidence. And I'll say this. So I had a guy named Jason Selk on my podcast. He's one of the top performance coaches in the world. And I asked Jason throughout his time with the St. Louis Cardinals, when they had the best average winning percentage in history over a 10-year stretch, I said, what was your secret there? And he's like, it's really not going to impress you. But every night I had them write down 3 wins from the day. 3 wins. Now they could be as small as, in my life, I want to be an intentional husband and dad. Okay, well, I took my kids to school this morning. I really could have used that time to maybe get a workout in or work on something else. But I took them to school. That's a win, because that's one of my goals, is to be an intentional dad and husband. Okay, that's one small win. Okay, what are 2 more? And by writing them down each night, he found that these individuals were becoming so much more self-confident because they were paying attention to their wins throughout the day, as opposed to when you lay your head down at night and you can only think of that one time you lost your patience on the kids, that one business deal you screwed up today, that one phone call that didn't go the way you wanted. That's what you focus on naturally. That's how we're ingrained as human beings. And so you flip it on its head when you start stacking wins, taking note of them, and realizing, if I continue to do this, if I continue to get 1% better each day, I'm going to be a totally different person in a great way in 3 to 5 years, as opposed to kind of just slowly moving through life, maybe heading in the wrong direction. I'm not exactly sure. And so Jason Selk talks about, and I believe this, self-confidence is the number one indicator for success, whatever it is. Success as a mom, success as a podcaster, success as a friend, whatever it may be, self-confidence is going to lead you to that. And the number one way to create that self-confidence is to stack those wins and take note of them each day.
It almost sounds like he's talking about intentionality, and really creating intention each and every day about the things that you want to focus on.
Right.
And then those things that you're putting focus and attention on are the things that help you navigate self-confidence and grow as a person and become successful, however that's defined.
Yeah, and taking note of that intentionality, because we can say we're going to be intentional, and Shannon's going to be intentional, I'm going to be intentional, I'm going to show up here in an intentional way, prepared for this podcast, trying to bring some value. But if at the end of the day, all I can think about is when I tripped over my words calling the Bills podcast tonight, I could completely forget about the coffee meeting I had before this and got to grow with 2 awesome individuals. And the time I spent here, the hospital visit I have with the families after this, I could forget about all those things and just simply think about the one time I tripped over my words on the broadcast or called a guy with the wrong name, because that's what's going to hit my brain first, is that self-correction, and forget about all those small wins that are getting me closer to where I want to get to in life.
It's so easy to let your head do all the time. I mean, your mind can just chirp, 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 chirp. And my mom used to say this a lot when I was younger. When I was a kid, I was bullied a lot when I was little. And I used to focus on all the negative things that happened that day. And I'd have trouble sleeping and I'd be really upset sometimes when I went to bed. And she said, tell me one good thing. She'd sit on the edge of the bed, one good thing that happened to you today. And I'd sit there and be like, I don't know. I got a B on my Spanish test. Okay. And I'm like, but that's not really a good thing. She's like, yes, actually, it's a good thing. Like, redefining how we see the wins each day and what they look like. And writing them down is actually great. I think I'm going to start doing that again.
And look, I can be as lazy about this as anybody and not write them down. But when you write things down, it hits your brain 7 times harder. It's just the act of writing it down, and whether that's taking notes at a talk, whether that's writing down your gratitude list in the morning or your wins at night, writing them down makes it 7 times more powerful for your brain.
Yeah, I totally. And there's actually research to support that theory.
Absolutely.
So it's easy to get lost in the shuffle of life, especially these days. And this is something I've been chomping at the bit to talk to you about. With more and more social media talent out there, ever-changing rules of social media and the internet, working remotely for many people because of the pandemic and becoming more siloed, economic hardships, and the increasing use of AI, which is artificial intelligence, for those who don't know, which is also making some people's talents, their jobs, obsolete right now. How have you been navigating some of those challenges, and what advice do you have for others, especially when it comes to the dangers of AI?
Yeah, well, in regards to AI and social media and all of this, first off, I'd say give yourself a little grace because we're in uncharted territories.
Completely.
And so, I'm very big on learning from others in life, not stepping on the landmines they stepped on. Well, we're at a point right now where it's very difficult because we haven't learned from our parents that just aimlessly scrolling can be terrible for our brains and our attention span and everything else. We haven't. Our parents grew up comparing their yard and their cars to just those right next to them in their neighborhood, as opposed to now where I could be comparing myself to someone out in California that I would have never known or even seen in my life. And now I'm robbing myself of joy because I'm comparing myself to...
And it's decreasing self-confidence.
Yes, exactly. And you're comparing yourself to some idealized version of themselves with a filter and everything else. The one day that they, had their diet perfect and no inflammation and they got a 6-pack, and you're comparing yourself to them as opposed to seeing them on a day-to-day basis. So I say all that, give yourself some grace because we're all going to trip up. Look, I can scroll with the best of them and spend way too much time on my phone in a week. And honestly, I can see what that does to me mentally throughout.
And it's deceptive too.
Yeah, throughout the week. But then I would also say, and I tell this to college kids I speak to and all that. Be very careful of social media and what gets put on there, but also be intentional about it because you can build a brand and it can be powerful and you can do so much good from social media. Like it is a powerful, powerful tool to where you own it and be intentional with it. We keep coming back to intentionality, but
really do.
Be intentional about how you approach social media to where you're putting yourself out there where a future spouse might say, man, I would really love to be with this person. Or a future business would say, man, look at this person right here. They're great. As opposed to, there's a few pictures of them partying. There's some goofy meme. Oh, this is a great one. Okay, he likes to travel.
Or deciding to rant too much.
Exactly. Yeah. And so my thing would just be careful with it. Give yourself some grace and be intentional about it. And then this new space with AI is insane. I was having a conversation about it last night, and I mean, even what they're doing in the sports world now with predicting plays and all this. I mean, it's truly, one of my concerns moving forward is that this just gets into the right hands and great things come from it, as opposed to what could happen terribly,
devastating
if it doesn't.
Yeah, and I think that's the one tricky thing with it, because even in the medical arena, AI is being used a lot in the medical arena, and it can have such a huge impact. It can make such a huge difference. But in the same respect, if it's used the wrong way, and the trick with AI is that it's learning beyond a rate that we can even catch up with.
Right.
So it's predicting human behavior before we even get a chance to understand how AI is actually working. And that's the scary part. And I think that, it takes the element of humanality out of it. I mean, human interaction, human engagement, connectedness, that is what makes the world go round. And this kind of pulls a piece of that away. It may make jobs easier. It may be able to predict certain things, and it may help with medical technology and advancements, which are all great things. But if we can't really contain and curb how it learns so that it doesn't get away from us, it can really be a danger.
Yeah, and you see that where with some of the smartest people in the world are saying the exact same thing right now.
Well, the father of AI was on 60 Minutes and said the same. He goes, in 5 years, this is going to be a problem.
Right. And that's where we need to intentionally, as a society and the leaders of our country and the world, need to rein it in to where we're using it in a really productive way. Yeah. And yes, people are going to lose their jobs. That happens with any kind of technological advancement. There's going to be people that lose their jobs. They'll pivot, hopefully, into something else. Yep. But the bad stuff that can come from this could be detrimental when you think about wars and all of that. And
again, it all comes back to intentionality. It really does come back to intention and figuring out the best ways to harness it without also losing that human connection that makes us who we are in this world, right. Which is very rare. So I think that's the important piece. What's one piece of advice or one mental health tool that you wish someone had imparted on you when you began your career?
Yeah, when I began my career, one thing I would say is to start a gratitude practice, whatever that looks like. Writing down 3 things every single day you're grateful for over a 30-day period has been shown to rewire your brain to where you're approaching each day looking for those things, because your brain is trying to make it easy as possible on itself at all times. So if it knows that you have to write down 3 things you're grateful for the next morning, you'll start making note of those little things throughout the day so that it's easier to write down in the morning so you don't have to rack your brain for it. Yeah. And so you start looking for more positives in life. I just think a gratitude practice can help so many people out there by writing 3 things every day they're grateful for. And I mentioned the stacking wins earlier. Yeah. When someone's going through a really tough time in their life, which I've been in those storms as well, my advice to them would be start with writing down 3 things you're grateful for every day and writing 3 wins at the end of the day, and just see where that takes you. Mm-hmm. And
it doesn't take a lot of time.
No,
it takes a few minutes.
It truly doesn't. Yeah. But you will start to be more self-confident and more grateful, which is going to show up as a more joyful, confident person that people want to be around. And no matter what that storm is in life, you're going to come through it better because of that.
I think it's interesting because as we were talking about like social media and getting inundated with that and AI and everything else, I can see how this practice would actually help with that as well. And I would urge everybody that listens to this, because one of the practices that I actually do first thing in the morning, I actually power my phone off for 20 minutes. I power it off completely. I shut it down. I put it in another room, and then I sit. And I stay present in that moment for 20 minutes, a half an hour, 45 minutes. That's a perfect time to write down 3 things of gratitude and then to reevaluate what the day looked like at the end of the day. It's mindfulness at its best, and it's retraining the brain from a lot of habitual things that we go through in life that kind of stack up that we don't realize have become habits.
Yeah, and I talk a lot about this in the book. These daily habits that from a mental space can really enhance your life as opposed to, we hear all about mental health issues, and I'm so glad that it's become more mainstream to talk about it, because then when it's talked about it and it's open, now it can be addressed. But if it's never talked about, then it'll never get addressed. But the people that I know that live the most fulfilled lives generally have some type of spiritual practice, some type of silence, meditation, whatever it may be, some type of physical practice in their life, some type of gratitude or whatever it may be, and then positive interactions with people each day, whether that's friends, a spouse, family, whatever it is. And there's these pillars, like we mentioned earlier, that when you see these trends of people, and when I say successful people, I'm not necessarily saying it may mean financial success, but it may not mean what the world would say financial success is nowadays.
I'm glad that you brought that up.
Like, to me, a successful person is living a fulfilled life with joy and love and passion. Like, that's a successful person. It's not the car they drive. It's not the house they live in. It's not what their bank statement says.
Yeah.
You can be miserable and have all of those things.
And I know those people.
Yeah, and you can be miserable. And to me, that's not successful.
No, not at all.
And so I detail that a lot in the book that, I gave you the advice on the gratitude practice and writing down the wins. That's a simple one.
Yep.
It goes into a lot more depth. And, as you're really trying to dig in on yourself in these storms in life, there's a lot of pillars that you can dig into, and I think you should.
And we'll have, for everybody that's listening, we'll have Eric's book up on the website. We'll have a hyperlink to take people directly to it so they can order it. You've been very blessed in your life as well. And we talk about all these hurdles and all these challenges you've been through, but you've also been very blessed. And you had an amazing upbringing and amazing parents that really gave you guys wonderful energy. You also have a loving wife, and you have a son and a daughter. As we get ready to wrap up, and we're going to go into some rapid fire questions, which are really fun. But what does being a good husband and a good father mean to you? What does that look like to you?
To me, that is being intentional with them at all times, where they get you're present with them in those moments. And when I say all of this, my wife would probably laugh at some of these because, but this is what the ideal version is in my mind. As a husband, as a man, you're a provider, a protector. You provide that love for your family, and you're someone they want to be around. And so to me, it's complex, but it's that daily striving to be that ideal husband and father, and to me, just feel blessed beyond measure to be married with someone that we get along so well, and we have the same values and the same passions. And I say the same passions. I'm passionate about golf. She's not, but making an impact. Yes, and so to me, it's that daily intentionality of trying to show up your best for them each day, and understanding that you and your spouse are never
going to be.
Yeah, you're never going to be perfect. Like, neither of you are.
How long have you guys been married or together? How long have you guys been together?
We've been married for 11 years, and we've been together for 15 years.
Okay. And the only reason I ask that is because I've had a lot of people ask me over the course of going through the loss of my husband, how did you make it? Because Mike and I were together for 20 years. We were married for 13, together for 20. And they're like, how? How is that even possible? Because nowadays, everybody's like, when things get tough, they just say, well, we'll get divorced, or it didn't work, or, we're on different paths. So for you to say that is so crucial. That's extremely important to me, because I think that being in a relationship, you're going to go through peaks and valleys. You're going to go through ups and downs. And when you can stay present and intentional every single day about wanting to show up for the other person, and knowing that you're not always going to be on the same wavelength, that doesn't change the course of being devoted to the relationship that you have. You guys chose each other for a reason. And you're not always going to be Mike used to say, and I hated it, but he always used to say, we're like oil and water. And it drove me nuts, because I'm like, well, what does that mean? Oil and water don't mix. And he's like, no, actually they do, but they just don't always jive together. He's like, they balance, they sit next to each other, they just don't always meld. He's like, sometimes we have different things that we like to do. Sometimes we like doing the same things. He's like, but we're perfect because our partnership, we balance each other. And that's what oil and water do. It's a balance.
Yeah.
And so,
that's well said.
Yeah, it's just, there's so much value in that, and being able to look at the other person and be able to say, and the reason I bring this up is because when things do get tough in life, and when you are going through grief or loss or a storm, the tendency is to turn on your spouse or your partner, or to take it out on them, or to stop communicating, and then go in completely different directions. And that's when you need to come together the most. And communication can be so unbelievably hard to do. It is not always easy to be vulnerable and to open up and remember that the other person is going to see things not in the same way that you're seeing things. But my mom used to say all the time when I was little, And growing up, and even after I met Mike, my mom and dad have been married for 51 years. So
Wow.
yeah, she always used to say, there are times that your dad drives me bonkers. There were times when you kids were young that we couldn't stand each other. She's like, but when I took a step back, I could always say, I love the person that he is as an individual. He is my best friend. I like him outside of us.
Mm.
And that carried with me. And so do you see, like, do you see your relationship with your wife the same way? Like, is she your best friend? Do you see?
Yeah,
that?
And I brag on her constantly. Like, I tell people all the time, I'm like,
That was the platform.
she's the coolest person I've ever met. And it drives me nuts how little she can care about things that I would sweat over, and she just doesn't care.
Water.
But to me, we balance each other out in that regard.
Yep.
And I admire those things because I wish I didn't have all of those tendencies about stressing about every little thing, and everything's trying to make every little thing perfect and worried about what other people think. I mean, my wife does not care what anybody thinks. It's us and our family, and she will blow off any engagement, this and that, to protect us.
Yep.
And I'm the opposite. I'm like, well, I have to go to this event because I agreed to go and I feel like I should go. And she's like, that's fine. I think you should go because it's going to wear on you mentally, but I'm not going to go. I'm going to stay here with the kids. And that's fine. And we get each other. We could fill an entire podcast on these conversations.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode.
Coming from a divorced home, I wanted to be very intentional about getting married and staying married. And so I've read a bunch on it. I've had guests on the podcast to talk into this. We've been in a couples Bible study for over 7 years that meets, maybe once a month, to where we're constantly learning from other couples. And
you put the work in.
Yeah. And I read a book called Radical Marriage that I loved. And my resounding theme that came out of it, and my most memorable theme that came out of it, was always try and outserve your wife and don't keep score. Keeping a score is going to be the worst thing you can do in your marriage, because there's going to be times where it's always going to be out of balance. Someone's doing more work, maybe outside the home, and then the other one's doing all the work inside the home. And it's so easy to keep score. And if you take the mindset that I'm always going to outserve my spouse, it's amazing what can come from that. And
that sounds freeing.
Yeah. And so one of the ways that I put myself in that mindset each day is in the morning, get out the coffee filter, get out the coffee. I wake up much earlier. So if I made her the coffee, if I make the coffee in the morning, it's going to be cold by the time she gets up. So it's get all the preppings for it and set it out. So when she starts her day, when she looks at that coffee that she's going to go make first thing in the morning, she knows that my intention is to serve her that day. Yeah. And it's amazing where instead of maybe the little things that are driving you nuts, or I wish she would do this, or I wish she would do that, when you understand that you're both just trying to serve the other, it's amazing how those just kind of go away.
You're just always putting forth the effort, and you're always showing the other that you matter. I see you and you matter. And that's huge.
Right.
Okay. So I do want to get in to some rapid fire questions before we end today. And I want to thank you so much again for everybody that's listening. This Eric Wood is on with us right now. He's got this amazing book called Tackle What's Next, and we will have that information out there. He does a lot of public speaking, retired NFL player, really amazing, grounded individual. A lot to learn from this guy. So the first rapid fire question I have for you, and this is a don't think, just answer. What's one dream you had as a kid that you feel has gone unfulfilled, or you were glad it didn't come true?
As a kid, I saw people in our community that had money, and they were either doctors or lawyers. And so in my mind, it was, or engineers. And I was like, I have to be one of those things. And I'm glad it didn't happen. I got to be a football player.
I don't know if I could see you being an attorney or.
No, my grandpa, he was a judge in town and a county commissioner. And so that's where that probably appealed to me.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. What's your favorite stress food?
My favorite stress food is probably my favorite food, which is sushi.
Ooh, I wouldn't consider that a stress food, but that's a really good one. I love sushi. I was expecting you to say something fried.
Man, I appreciate those things, and I will eat wings and burger. I'll eat bad with the best of them.
When you're in Buffalo,
but I just know how I'm going to feel afterwards.
Yes.
And I played offensive line at 310 pounds, and I've lost a bunch of weight since then.
Yeah.
When you're 310 pounds, you kind of just live in a state of inflammation, and you're always full because you have to eat. I had to be that big to play center in the league. Well, now that I don't weigh that much anymore, I know what that food can do to me. Yeah, I appreciate all of the guilty pleasures food-wise. Trust me.
But sushi's your go-to.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you love about the city of Buffalo, New York?
I mentioned earlier, I love the people up here. There's restaurant owners that are like family to us now. We have neighbors that we still stay in contact with. I love the people in the Bills organization that I get to spend time with. I love the people around my foundation that's become a fund under the hospital. The people up here make it special.
And it's very true. For anybody who is not familiar with Western New York or the Buffalo area, we do have a very unique, special community in this area.
Yeah.
It's hard to put a descriptive word to it, but yeah. Where's your go-to place to eat when visiting Buffalo? And I know you just said you have some friends that are restaurant owners, so don't make anyone mad. But where's a go-to spot for you to eat?
So after most games, we would go to Elio de Paolo's, which is an Italian spot, and they are true like family. Joe Yergi at Mulberry and Timmy down there. Mulberry's so great. That's where we ate last night.
Yeah.
And then for wings, Joe and Justin Barron started a spot called Sunny Reds that the wings in the description have my name. So I would say Sunny Reds for some wings,
Good
which
plug there.
In my opinion, it's them or Barbill for my favorite wings in town.
And the reason, so just for everybody who knows, Buffalo is a food mecca. We really have become a food, when it came time for Buffalo to redefine itself and get away from the whole Rust Belt mentality and really had to have a resurgence, food became kind of this cult thing that really just developed. And the Buffalo, I used to do a ton of food writing as part of my work, and the Buffalo community has just blown it out of the water when it comes to food culture and diversity in this area.
It's phenomenal. I bring people to the Italian spot, the wings, and then for fine dining, I'm going to Hutch's. And,
I love Hutch's. Yeah, that's a go-to. That's a must.
And Hutch has been so generous with the Evanwood Fund. It's unbelievable how generous he is with that. And then they also produce an incredible meal. So
and the atmosphere there is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and as we get into, because this episode is airing around the holidays, so for everybody who's out there, I can tell you right now that Hutch's and Mulberry's are two of the best places to go to around Christmas time. Mulberry's decks it out with.
I actually had a conversation with them last night about how they do that. I assume they hired it out, but they do that themselves.
They do that in-house.
Yes.
That's a lot of work.
I know.
Because it's impressive. I mean, it is it's like Santa Claus came up and just his bag exploded inside. And it's magical and it's beautiful and it's gorgeous in there. So that's impressive. Last question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
In 5 years, our kids will be 13 and 10. So I'll probably be attending a lot of recitals and ball games and all of that jazz. Likely still calling games for the Bills and podcasting in a thriving, healthy marriage. That's probably where I see it. Maybe a little bit better golfer than I am now.
Oh, I suck at golf, so I'd rather play baseball. But yeah, I mean, you can't ask for more than that. I mean, it's contentment.
Right.
I mean, and those aren't even fantastical things. They're just the things you have now.
Right. Yeah. And I could dig way deeper and say I'm going to be a healthier version of myself and more physically fit and continue to grow in my faith. There's a number of buckets or pillars that I want to grow in, but this is rapid fire, and that's what hit my brain first.
Nope, we're sticking with that because I like it. Well, Eric, thank you so much for joining us today and for being here and for being part of this episode that really, gets into, this is airing, around the holidays and tough time of year for many people. So I think this is going to be really uplifting for so many and give them hope and inspiration, which is exactly what we exude and what we want in this podcast. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come on.
Yeah, this was amazing. So for everybody who's listening, thank you so much for being with us here at the Game On Glio podcast. And with that, we will be right back. This episode is brought to you by UB Neurosurgery. Learn more at ubns.com.